Hello! Yesterday on Ramblings with Rebecca, we talked about legal definitions of war, and basically came to the conclusion that war is happening when the laws of war are in place. Yes, one of those circular definitions that isn't necessarily all that helpful and seems a bit absurd. However, that's the best way to understand it, unfortunately. Historically, states could unilaterally declare a bilateral war, which perhaps doesn't seem quite fair. So country A could say, hey, country B, guess what? We're at war. The laws of war are now in place. Bye-bye laws of peace. Haha, this is legal for me to do now. I know, not super fair. But along with changes in warfare and how war is done and who all can engage in war, right? I mean, so really it's basically two nation or near nation actors who are at war, right? So guerrilla warfare, terrorist acts of violence, those aren't technically classified as war generally, although we may colloquially, refer to them as war. The war on terror, the war on drugs, like, not actually wars by the legal understanding of them. Although, different sets of things may be considered legal or not legal by certain governments as they work against terror, drugs, etc. Anyway, but so as conceptions of warfare and methods of doing warfare have changed, so too have understandings of what warfare means legally. In medieval times, so think Robin Hood, Arthur, Crusades, when just war theory was originated. War was primarily a clash of legal rights. It was an enforcement measure for a vindication of legal rights that had been breached. Just war was a sanction against lawbreakers and a self-help measure, so to take back territory that is unlawfully occupied, to compel another side to pay for some injury that had been done, that kind of thing. It was very much about restoring the legal status quo. And in that understanding, just war and medieval understandings of war are pretty conservative, meant to vindicate existing rights, reestablish the status quo, that did not create or destroy existing rights. Moving into more recent history, 18th, 19th century, thereabouts, the positivist view of international law comes into play, and war is no longer seen just as a vindication of legal rights, but also may be used to pursue the national interest. So, while generally speaking, one would hope and assume that it would be cheaper and easier for states to pursue national interest through means of peace, so it may be the case that states will come to the conclusion that the best way to get what they want and what is in the national interest would be served through war. And so this positivist view of what warfare is was very progressive in the most literal meaning of the term, not in like the liberal, Democrat versus Republican bipartisan understandings of progressive and conservative. War could be the source of and create new legal rights. So this positive view of war allowed war to correct past imbalances, to bring legal situations into the realm of political reality, because of course whoever should or could win a war should have law on their side. Alas. So this moves into this very progressive understanding of war. The Pact of Paris, also known as the Kelly-Brand Pact, 1928, so just post-First World War, is the first major promise by states not to engage in war. Specifically, what the parties to the pact did was promise not to pursue war as a matter of policy, instead moving back to issues of self-defense. So this is kind of a reversal back onto like theories of and understandings of just war, right? So saying we're not going to use this progressive positivist view of war anymore and use war to advance national interests. We'll only do it in self-defense if absolutely necessary. The treaty itself doesn't have language on self-defense because there was a fight over how the wording should be done. All of the parties of the pact, it was pretty clear that they, meant to allow for self-defense to be there. League of Nations, Pact of Paris, have now been obliterated, partially via World War II. But the Pact of Paris was definitely a precursor to a lot of the language at the United Nations, whereby now war between states, member states of the UN, is pretty much illegal, regardless, with, certain allowances for self-help in self-defense, but, the first action is in fact illegal. That does not, of course, mean it doesn't happen.